Okay, so I wanted to take a few minutes to go through what we went through in class the other day. I'm going to cover it much more quickly than I did in class because you've already seen it once, and because you can rewind and pause this. So, first thing, we know that we can manipulate this object by hitting W. We can move it around, we can scale it, we can rotate it, right? We know all that. WER for those. So the sub-object manipulation, though, is the next step of this. And each different type of model has a sub-object mode. Now, this is a polygon model, but NURBS models have sub-objects as well. If I right-click, I can choose vertex, edge, or face, right? So a vertex is any theoretical point on this model, right, that is marked as a vertex. Okay, an edge, we define that in two different ways. We could say that's the place where two faces meet, or it's a line that connects any two vertices. Okay, and I like that one better, a line that connects any two vertices. And so I can edit that edge, right? And then a face is any enclosed area made up of edges, right? So the largest enclosed, we can have a 5,000 edged face, but the smallest area we can have is a 3-edged face, right? That's the smallest face we could have. And so if I draw, sorry, I created it over here. If I go over here and look at this, we can see that really a 3-edged face is just a quad cut in half. So we want to keep all of our faces as either quads or triangles, and never go any higher than a 4-sided face. Okay, so that's the thing we're going to kind of emphasize in this class. Now, we know also that we can hit 3. If we hit 3, we're going to get a smooth shaded version, or a smoothed previewed version of it. So this is the model, not smooth. 3 is smooth. So 1, 1, smooth it, and so we'll recognize that any edge that we have, there's actually not a way to bend that edge, right? It's always going to stay a straight line. If I grab that and move it, it's always going to draw a straight line to it, right? When I do this smooth preview option, you'll see that those edges bend. And so basically this is sort of a preview of what this would look like if it were similar to a NURBS object, right? And so if I grab vertices here, we can move those around and they work fine. So let's look at what happens, how this smooths, right? And so if I go to my object, back to my channel box, right, I can go to my inputs under here, and this is the node that was generated when this object was created. In fact, this is the node that created this object. And so since we haven't really edited the object very much, it's still just its basic shape, we can go back in here and change things about that. We can add additional subdivisions. We could actually change its width and height if we wanted to, and you realize that's not messing with the scale when I do that. So I can highlight any channel, and in the viewport, if I middle mouse click and drag, it will raise or lower that number. Okay, and so if I just raise this up to 2 and I hit 3 out here, you'll see that we have a slightly different version of that model. It's not a sphere anymore, right? It's sort of a rounded box, and you'll see that as I change these numbers and add more or less subdivisions in it, the way these corners are rounded off is different. Okay, so if I take this down here low, the reason this is so rounded is because it has to average, or sort of like, I don't want to say round again, but it has to kind of, I guess, average the distance and the shape from this edge, to this edge, in order to figure out how this edge will look. Okay, so to figure this edge out, it has to look at this edge, and they're both really far away from it, right? And so if I add another edge in here, and it gets closer, it doesn't have to round it as much, because that's not as far of a distance, right? And the more we do that, the closer we get those edges, the sharper that edge will be. Okay, so if I take this back down to 3 by 3, or maybe even 4 by 4, right? If I want to make this edge really sharp, another option for that is to grab this edge, move it really close, right? And so I could do something like that if I wanted this sort of top corner here to be a little sharper, right? If I still wanted this corner to be really soft, I could just pull this back. And see, we're getting a slightly different interpretation between how to round those edges depending on how we do this, right? So how I'm grabbing a full edge is I'm just double clicking on that edge, and it's going to select an entire edge loop all the way around the object. And so we can see that that goes all the way around. Now it knows to select that edge because it like if I double click on this, it knows to select this edge all the way around because it looks at the similar edges, right? It's not going to get here to this point and then just dart off and select this edge instead, right? Because it realizes that all of these are quads. But if it gets to a point where there's some triangles, it won't know necessarily what to do. I will say try to manipulate this on a single axis, like just grabbing this point here, I move this around, be like, yeah, I think that's what I'm going for, right? But you realize it also pushes it in all axes, and it's very easy to get messy that way. So I usually try to work within a single axis to get the option I want. That way it will stay clean on the axes I'm not manipulating. Okay, let's move on to box 2. So box 2, we're going to, we have this amount of mesh here, you know, we have all these faces, but I need more. I need to turn this into something else, right? And so the first and most common way of getting that is extruding. So if I grab any face and I say edit mesh, extrude, and we have to use the extrude under the face option here, I'm going to get the option to extrude that out. Now, I have some options in here to adjust the thickness, that's how far it extrudes it, the offset, right, I can make it a little bit bigger, and how many divisions it has. And those will stay sort of in tangent with that as long as I'm using this manipulator to edit it, right? And so if that's what I needed, I can get that. And this can be a very quick editing tool. I can go in here and, you know, hit G to repeat the previous option, and just keep making edits to this. And so this is how a lot of models are generated, right? It's through this sort of manipulation of the faces. Now we can also extrude edges. If I needed this edge extrude, I go to Edit Mesh and under Edge, and we can also do vertices as well, but that's a little less helpful, a little less common. And so we just have a single edge extruded out. Now that's probably going to give us some issues if we smooth it, but you get the idea of how that could work. Now there's a couple of options too when I extrude these faces out. So if I grab a group of faces and I say mesh, edit mesh, extrude, and I extrude these out, and I grab one of these individual faces and move it around, right? Like they're all stuck together. It extruded that as a group, right? But let's go back and do that again before the extrude, right? I'm going to go edit mesh, extrude, right? And if I go over here to my extrusion input, I can turn off this keep faces together. So right now it's set to on, which is also 1. And so if I type 0 for off, right? Now if I grab these faces and move them, you'll see that they detached, and that's going to give us a different result. Right. So this is the extrude option is extremely powerful in how you're going to manipulate your mesh, right? So let me move this out of the way a little bit here so it's not in the way of this object. So let's move on. There's another option to extrude, because if I needed to extrude in this shape, this windy pattern, I could, you know, do what we just did, grab this, extrude it, and then just keep doing that and like warp it all the way around through here and follow this, right? That's very slow to make that happen. So I'm going to undo, go back to here. So there's another option. If I select that face and select the curve and hit Edit Mesh, Extrude, it's going to extrude all the way to the end of that edge. Okay, and so that seems maybe less helpful. I don't know, because we don't have as much like that, you know, it doesn't get that windy through it, right? And that's the reason is because that's just one edge going from the end of there to the end of there. If we want that to sort of adhere to that curve more, we have to add more divisions, right? You see, as we add more divisions, it starts looking a little messed up, but as we get a little higher, you'll start to see that it goes along that edge. And so if we crank this up to something, you know, high, like 100, we're actually going to get a pretty decent result. The cool thing is I can also still rotate this as long as I'm within the extrude tool to get a slightly different thing happening there as well. Now, and all this is still dynamic. I can change the thickness or whatever it is I need to change on that. So after you've done all that, like this is still editable. Like if I go back in here to object mode, and I hit 4, and it's like this curve, you'll see that if I grab this curve and move it, it's going to move that whole section, right? It's like it's hooked to it, and it is. It's hooked to it because it remembers how it was generated. It remembers that it used that curve to create that shape. And in fact, I can go in here and select the control vertices on this curve and still manipulate how this thing is shaped. Like if I need to change that and make it more like this, right? All of that is still manipulatable elements. So if I don't want that anymore, if I want this thing to just stand on its own, or I even just want to be able to delete this curve, I can select this mesh and say edit, delete by type, history. And so what that's going to say, and let me do that again. I'm going to go back. So if you look over here before I did that, we have that poly extrude face 7 input, and that means it remembers that we used an extrude face and all of the settings on that to create that shape, and that's how the shape is generated. But if I have this mesh selected and I hit edit, delete by type, history, all of that history disappears, and now it just thinks of it as a brand new mesh, and I can change these vertices and it doesn't affect it at all. And that allows me to go in here, and it's just a cleaner piece to work with, because when it remembers all that history, it can get a little sloppy. So sometimes though you need the object to be shaped differently than this mesh will allow you to shape it, right? And so I'm going to show you some new tools. We have this modeling toolkit, which is down here along the side. This was introduced a couple of versions back of Maya. It's actually a plug-in set that Maya has just sort of made permanent. And so a lot of these things that we've looked at, like the extrude, and later we'll see the bevel, a lot of those things, there's a version of this in here too. Maya just has more than one. And so we can extrude out of here as well if we wanted to. We can use their extrude tool, which works a little bit different, and you have to change the values down here instead of on that tool in front of it. But it's a good extrude tool. There's nothing wrong with it. However, a couple of things that are neat on this is we have the multi-component tool, which will allow us to select a vertex, an edge, or a face, like without having to switch back and forth, right? Or we can choose here if we want to switch to them individually, right? And so I'm actually just going to go back to regular mode, and I'm going to go to multi-cut, okay? And so multi-cut is going to do something kind of neat. It's going to allow us to sort of draw new edges in here. So you find a vertex and you can click on it, and you can draw either to another vertex or to the middle of the edge somewhere. Okay, so let's say I wanted to do that, that. And I wanted to do that because I needed to extrude this shape out. So I can do that now. I can do edit mesh, extrude, and I can use that to generate that new mesh. Now something you need to be careful with, like we said, we want to keep this as 4-sided faces, and the multi-cut makes it really easy to mess that up. So let's say I just did this, there, and there. Okay, so although that model looks fine right now, it didn't like explode or anything, right? Let's look at some of this here. We have a 5-sided face here, right? Because if I grab this vertex, you'll see that It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 edges that make up this face. And this is 5-sided, this is 5-sided, and the question is, why does that matter? Nobody really seems to care. If you look at this, it's like, oh, it still looks like the same model, right? It's not broken. Let me show you why that's important. So if I'm going to create it, I'm going to create another plane, make this thing much more simple so we just understand it better. Okay, so as I said earlier, a 5-sided, or any edge, like the simplest edge you can have, or I'm sorry, the simplest face you can have is a 3-sided face. And so by default, right now we have a 4-sided face, but you'll realize that a 4-sided face is really just it is just two triangles. A quad is really just two triangles with an invisible line drawn through the middle, right? That's all it is. And we can tell that because if I grab this and bend it, we get this edge, or we get this sort of seam down the middle, right? And if I deleted that edge, it didn't actually change it, right? It's still going to render it exactly the same way. Now, that's different. Like, Maya can still calculate that very easily because it knows that if I move this vertex, it knows that it can kind of draw an invisible line in there somewhere and end up making the whatever shape it wants to make, right? Like, this isn't a hard thing to interpret for Maya, and it can just pick one of where it wants to draw its invisible edge, and that's fine. Like, that's fine. Maya can figure that out. Let's create a slightly more complicated object now. Let's go in here. I want to reduce this one a bit. Let's drop it down to something like this, right? And I'm just going to grab all these edges in the middle. This is something you shouldn't do in regular modeling. So in general, if I wanted to get rid of all of those and still keep this as a quad, I could do Control Delete, right? And you'll see that now these are still individual edges. But if I go back, if I actually just delete them instead of holding down Control, what you'll see is all of these edges now are still there. It's still divided up into all these pieces, right? And if I want to select that and move it and all these axes, like, it doesn't seem like there's really any issue with this, right? Like, the model still is the right shape, and even though this is a like a 20-sided face or something, so what? Like, it still looks fine. And so let me show you why that's a problem. It's because if I grab this edge and I move it up, and I grab this edge and I move it down, and I grab this edge and I move it up, like, I can't tell what that is. Like, I can't tell what shape that is, right? Maya's drawing some invisible lines in here that I can't predict. I don't know where it's going to connect. And apparently it does want to connect those two lines, but that's not what I would have predicted. And so really all this is doing is just dividing it up into triangles. It's just triangles we don't have any control of, and so that's just bad. Like, and on top of that, we don't really know how to render this, right? Like, Maya doesn't know how to add shadows to this in a way that we will understand how this is constructed. And so that's just, like, looking at that shape, I can't tell what is coming closer to me and what's going away from me, because this is a really complicated shape that's being drawn with too many edges, or with too little detail, right? We need all those edges connecting this together to make this clear of what this shape is supposed to be. So that's why we have to watch out for 4-sided and or anything higher than a 4-sided face. And anything higher than a 4-sided face is called an n-gon. The letter N as in, I don't know the military thing. What's something that starts with N? Ninja. So N is in ninja. N-gon, and that's because in math, you use an n to represent the number you don't know, and so pretty much any number higher than 4 is an n-gon. A quad is fine, a 4-sided face is fine, a 3-sided face is less fine, but still okay, and there's no such thing as a 2-sided face because you have to have at least 3 to make up a face, right? Okay, it's gone to 5. So sometimes I just, like, here's the thing that really kind of drives me nuts, is if I render this, you'll see how sharp that edge is, right? And it's like perfectly machined to a right angle all the way down to the microscopic level, right? And that's just something that doesn't really exist in the world. I mean, anything short of a knife is not that sharp. And so that seems like that's nitpicky, but if you actually look around at some of the objects in the room around you, you'll see that they, along the edges, they sort of pick up a little highlight, and you're not getting that highlight here. It looks too boxy. So I'm just going to go in here to Edges, and I'm just going to select a couple of these just so we can see what this next tool does. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to Edit Mesh, Edge, and it's under Bevel. And so Bevel is just going to round that off, and you'll see that even if I just do one bevel, now it's catching a highlight, right? And I can go back into my inputs and I can change how big that is. I can never remember which one it is. It's either the fraction or the offset, depending on, apparently it's the offset. And so I can set that to point, and turn this down, I think, to like 0.1, because then this fraction, is that how that works? Let's do 0.002. No, that's too much. 0.005. Okay. So now we got a really slight highlight on there, and that looks better, right? And you can tell that in contrast to there. Now the thing you have to watch out for is, let's go make that just a little bit bigger so we can see it. I'll do like a 1, right? So right now this is fine. It's all quads, and that's actually making a nice edge loop all the way around there. When I start adding more divisions to it, though, with this segment, so let's say I want it rounder, and I want to add that, that's also fine. It's very rounded, right? And so I think in this case we're not going to have any issues because it doesn't veer off in any weird direction, right? But if I were to select the edges like on this corner, let's say I just wanted to round that corner, and I go to Edit Mesh, Bevel, you'll see that it's going to start making me some triangles here. Now the triangles aren't a problem. The problem are these are now 5-sided faces, right? And so that's something you do have to kind of watch out for. If I go back in here and find this bevel, sometimes just adding more segments to it helps, but like that gets rid of that triangle, but it doesn't get rid of those 5-sided faces. So you gotta try to figure out what to do with that. And so be careful about how you use the bevel. It's not always going to give you the best result in the world that you need, but it's got a lot of options in improving your the way your roundedness looks on the corners here. Okay, and so you'll see that that's a sort of a lighting issue there. Maya doesn't know how to render that 5-sided face, and so it puts some weird shadows on it. Okay, so let's look at this guy here. This is box number 6, and so there's a couple things we have here. We have this hole in it, right? And so if I go to Edge and I select this, oh, I missed it. Select that edge around there. I just need to fill that hole in. I just want that to be solid again. So I accidentally deleted it. So if I go to Mesh and Fill Hole, it's just going to put it in there with one giant face. But again, this is an 8-sided face, not a 4-sided face. And so I need to put those edges back in there. And so if I go to Modeling Toolkit, we can use this multi-cut tool again to sort of slice that in there. Now in terms of topology, one of the things you may be noticing lately is that that's not the only way to get quads in there. Like that's a nice way, but like sometimes maybe that's not the flow you need. So I could also do it this way and this way. Right? And so that looks like 2 giant triangles, but you'll realize it's actually quads, right? And so now the interesting thing about this is my edges will now flow differently through this object, right? If I were to insert an edge loop, the edges would flow through here. And so we'll look at inserting edge loops here in just a little bit. Actually, I'll show you right now really quickly. So if I go to Mesh Tool and insert an edge loop here, you'll realize it just puts it in there wherever I want it, right? If I do this here though, look at Oh, it doesn't realize what to do. Okay, never mind. Because it doesn't know which way I want to take it, even though it should. So either way, we could make that edge loop go through there if we wanted to, and that would still be the correct topology. See, that's what happens when I get off script. Okay, so we have this piece here. We got this piece here, and the thing that we're needing now is to kind of connect that back together. Go ahead and put it back on that. That was nice. We needed to connect these two pieces back together, right? And so the tool that will do that is actually called a bridge tool. So that's what we need. We need to build a bridge from one piece to another, right? So I can insert an edge, or I can select the edges there, and I can go to Edit Mesh and Bridge. Okay, and when I do that, you're going to see it put one big face there. And although that's nice, I still need those edges down through there. And so I could insert those edges later, or I can just change my attributes on that and just add 2 more divisions there. Okay. I'll select this here, and I can do that again. Now, the modeling toolkit also has a bridge option, and I think it works pretty well as well, so we can crank up our divisions there. And it's basically whatever you have selected in here is what clicking in the viewport of the middle mouse button will change. So we don't really have anything to twist or any of that stuff. So, and so this should work again there. Okay, since divisions are on 2. And so either of those will work however you want to. Now, somebody else mentioned too, you could also fill that hole, but then you're going to end up with one large face there, and you'll just have to manually put those slices in it. So either of those will work. But that's how you sort of get from one face out in the open to another. Okay. So we briefly looked at the Insert Edge Loop tool. Let's go look at it again now, because this is a very interesting tool. If I go to Mesh, or Edit Mesh here, Mesh Tools, and it's the Insert Edge Loop tool, and you'll see that no matter which way these edges are flowing, I can click in here and I can insert one, right? And if I click on the edge, I can sort of slide it and get it closer or further away to whatever I want to. If I hit 3, when we can see this thing smoothed, say I wanted to sharpen up the bottom of this, I could click an edge and drag that really close to the bottom to get a sharper edge along the bottom, right? Now, what else I could do is I could use this to resculpt this shape. So I can insert that there and then just move it, right? And so rotate this. If I want to insert another edge loop, I can just hit G or click there, or I can go back to the mesh tool and insert edge loop. All right. And so that's going to allow me just to go inserting more and more of them, and hopefully start getting the shape that I need out of this. And so this is actually a really powerful tool to use and modeling. There's an extra feature I didn't really talk about in class, but we can insert with edge flow. So if I click on my tools here, right, and I scroll down, this tool, you'll see that I have this insert with edge flow, and if I click on that, it's going to try to figure out what shape I'm wanting to go for, so I don't have to move it as much. So if I insert it there, I go, see, it kind of snaps out there. But see, sometimes it doesn't do exactly what you want, and then sometimes it's going to, actually that's not bad. Sometimes it doesn't really know what you're wanting though, and so it's not, and sometimes it's going to do some rounding when you don't want it to. So that's sort of something I try to decide one way or the other whether I need that on or not. Okay, and so the last thing we're going to look at here, oh, and let's talk about this really quick. On your edges, when you're editing it, I can select this edge, and it's very easy to just want to grab this in the middle and scale that in to make it thinner there, but you realize you're also making it thinner here. So again, sticking to a single axis is helpful in keeping the, not accidentally editing one of the things you didn't mean to. So we have 2 different models here, right? And I want this to be one model. I want this to look very similar to just the box being extruded out of the top, right? So if I select these two pieces and I go to mesh, I can combine them. Okay, but before I do that, let's look in our outliner. Okay, so our outliner is really just all of the objects that are in our scene. And you'll see this, I got polycylinder 1, and that's why it's got this weird cap on it. It's just a cylinder with 4 sides. And I got this cube, right? And I wanted to, I want to merge these two together. I want to combine these two. So I select them, and I go Mesh, Combine, and watch what happens. I get a new mesh down here. It's P-Cube1, but those are still there, but they're just a different type of object now. And this is, again, this is the history at work. Okay, this is Maya remembering how that this used to be constructed, and if I wanted to grab this and move it, I can still move that as if it were a separate object. And I don't want that. I want this to just be a fresh object, and so I can just go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. And so I do that because a lot of people forget about that, and then they go back and look in their outliner later, and it's just a mess because that will create all these extra things that you don't really need anymore. And so now this is just one piece by itself, right? Now it's one piece, and if I select it, it's going to select it all as one piece, but it's two disconnected pieces of mesh. And so to weld that together, we got a couple of options. I can go in here and I can grab this vertex, this vertex, right? And I can go to, if I hold down Shift and right click, you're going to find a lot of modeling options in here, right? But one of them at the top is Merge Vertices. And so I can merge vertices to center, and it's basically just going to pull them together, right? But that's not really what I want. Shift right click. There's another option that's just Merge Vertices, right? And that will do the same thing, but it's only doing the same thing because I have 2 vertices selected. If I have a whole bunch of vertices selected and I go to Merge Vertices, you'll see it won't do anything. But actually it did. What it did is it only merged the vertices that were right on top of each other. So if you have 2 selected, it will merge to center. If you have 3 selected, it will only, 3 or more selected, it will only merge the ones that are right on top of each other within like a few, actually I can show you, within 0.01 units away from each other, and it will merge those together. And so since we don't have that, that's not really going to work, and that's not really what we want anyway, right? We want that vertex to be down there. And so I could just grab this vertex and hold down V to snap it to a point and just snap that there. Now that's still a separate vertex, right? If I select that there, it's still separate. It just looks like it's on top of it. But if I were to grab all these vertices now and hold Shift right click and do Merge Vertices, it will merge those together, right? But there's still an easier way, and there's actually a couple of easier ways. One of them is over here in the modeling toolkit. We have this Target Weld. So if I click on Target Weld and click on this vertex and drag it, I can weld it there. Now I can also do it with faces. I can weld this whole face to this whole face, right? And now Maya, this is the modeling toolkit option. Maya has another option under Mesh Tools. It's the Merge Vertex tool, and it's going to do something very similar. And so if you just prefer those tools, that's fine. Now, something else I wanted to show you is if I want to go in here now and just insert an edge loop to this, right? Go to Edit or Mesh, Insert Edge Loop tool. I can insert one here fine, and it doesn't have a problem with that because it knows how these edges are flowing. It has no idea how these edges are flowing though, because these are all triangles, and if I click one there, you realize it doesn't do anything. It doesn't know what to do really, and that's because this is a series of triangles, right? And so that is something you have to watch out for. Is like once Maya gets to a triangle, it doesn't know what to do. So you see, like it doesn't know where we wanted it to continue there, and now it's going to make decisions like that. And so that's not bad, like, but this is just something to remember, that it doesn't necessarily know what to do with a triangle. It only really knows what to do with a quad. when it comes to inserting the edge loop tool. So that's and it definitely doesn't know what to do with a 5-sided face on the insert edge loop tool or more. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll probably be making a separate video here in a bit that shows some extra tools we didn't go over in class. I'm not sure if I'll do that video or if I'll show it to you in person, but I may, keep your eye out for other videos. So I hope that helps, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.